Let's spend the day at my mother's house. You're not invited." The words hung in the air between us, my daughter-in-law's voice casual yet cutting, as if she were merely commenting on the weather rather than excluding me from a family holiday. My son Warren stood silently beside her in my living room, his eyes fixed on some invisible spot on my carpet. "I see." I kept my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I folded the cloth napkins I'd been preparing for tomorrow's dinner. Napkins that would now remain in their drawer. "And is there a particular reason I'm not welcome this year?" Imogen flicked an invisible piece of lint from her designer blazer. "We just want something more intimate this time. Family only. Family only." As if I, Margot Sinclair, mother of Warren and grandmother to 5-year-old Lily, somehow didn't qualify as family. If you're watching, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what time you're listening. Warren finally looked up, discomfort evident in his expression. "Mom, it might be easier this way, with Vivian hosting and all." I nodded slowly, carefully refolding the napkin in my hands for the 3rd time. "And Lily? Will I at least get to see her over the weekend?" Imogen checked her watch. "We'll have to see how the schedule works out. You know how hectic holidays can be." Yes, I knew about hectic holidays. I'd hosted 32 Thanksgiving dinners in my lifetime, including the 5 since my husband Edmund died. I'd maintained our traditions even as my heart was breaking, ensuring Warren always had a place that felt like home. "Of course," I said. "I understand." But as they left with perfunctory goodbyes, a strange calm settled over me. I didn't understand. Not really. And for the first time in years, I didn't try to. Instead of spending the evening preparing for a dinner that wouldn't happen, I opened my laptop and navigated to my inbox. There, still unread, was the invitation I'd received last week, an exclusive exhibition opening at the Prisma Gallery in New York, featuring the renowned photographer Dominic Thorne, the man whose work I'd analyzed extensively on my modest art blog, and who had, to my surprise, begun corresponding with me about my interpretations of his compositions. "Join us for a special Thanksgiving evening viewing, followed by an intimate dinner with the artist," the invitation read. I'd declined it automatically, assuming I'd be hosting my family as always. My cursor hovered over the reply button. A small, unfamiliar voice inside me whispered, "Why not? Why not indeed? What was keeping me in Chicago tomorrow? A silent apartment? Leftover turkey for one? Another evening of trying not to disturb, not to inconvenience, not to exist too loudly?" Before I could reconsider, I typed my acceptance and pressed send. Then, with the same unfamiliar decisiveness, I opened a travel website and booked a last-minute flight to New York, departing early tomorrow morning. I didn't discuss my plans with Warren or Imogen. I didn't call to complain or plead. I simply packed a small suitcase, selecting clothes I hadn't worn in years, items too bold, too colorful, too much, according to Imogen's subtle critiques. The next morning, as I settled into my airplane seat, a peculiar lightness filled me. For the first time since Edmund's death, I was doing something completely unpredictable. Something just for me. New York greeted me with its characteristic energy, all noise and color and possibility. The boutique hotel where I'd splurged on a room overlooked Madison Square Park, its trees adorned with early Christmas lights that twinkled against the gathering dusk. As I prepared for the evening, I studied my reflection in the mirror. At 63, I was neither young nor old, my silver-streaked dark hair framing a face lined by both joy and sorrow. I applied lipstick in a shade brighter than I'd worn in years and fastened my grandmother's pearls around my neck. The Prisma Gallery occupied a renovated industrial space in Chelsea, its massive windows showcasing the glittering art world within. I hesitated at the entrance, momentarily overwhelmed by doubt. What was I doing here? An aging art history professor from Chicago, inserting myself into this sophisticated New York scene. Before I could retreat, a tall figure appeared before me. Professor Sinclair. His voice was deeper in person than in our video correspondence, his British accent more pronounced. "You came." Dominic Thorne was not what I expected. Taller, his silver hair more abundant, his presence more commanding than photographs suggested. But it was his eyes that caught me. Intelligent, observant, and genuinely pleased to see me. "I found myself unexpectedly free," I replied, attempting nonchalance. His smile suggested he wasn't fooled. "A fortunate circumstance for us, then. Come, there's someone I'd like you to meet. The evening unfolded like a dream. The exhibition, a series of photographs capturing forgotten architectural masterpieces around the world, was breathtaking. More surprising was how Dominic introduced me to curators and critics as Professor Margot Sinclair, whose analysis of the interplay between light and shadow in medieval structures changed how I approach my compositions. Their respect was immediate, their questions thoughtful. For hours, I discussed perspective and composition, history and interpretation, my voice growing stronger with each exchange. Not once did anyone suggest my opinions were excessive or inconvenient. During dinner, seated beside Dominic at a long table in the gallery's private dining room, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the excellent wine. "You're different than I imagined," he said, his eyes studying me with frank appreciation. "Different how?" "Your writing is so confident, so assertive, but there's an apologetic note in your emails, as if you're asking permission to take up space." He tilted his head. "Yet tonight, you've held your own with the most insufferable art critics in New York." I laughed, surprising myself with the sound. Perhaps I needed to remember who I am. And who is that? The question was simple, but profound. Who was I without Edmund? Without my role as Warren's mother? Without the careful diminishing of self I'd practiced to avoid Imogen's displeasure? "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. His hand covered mine briefly. "That's the most honest answer I've heard all evening." Later, as the gathering moved to an impromptu tour of Dominic's studio above the gallery, someone took a group photo. Without thinking, I posted it to my social media accounts, something I rarely did, with the caption, "New Perspectives with Dominic Thorne at Prisma Gallery." It wasn't until much later, returning to my hotel room exhilarated rather than exhausted, that I noticed the flood of notifications on my phone. 6 missed calls from Warren, 3 increasingly demanding texts from Imogen, and most surprisingly, a message from Vivian Holloway herself, asking who that distinguished man was beside me. The final text from Warren made my stomach clench. "Mom, Lily saw your photo and is crying because you're with some strange man instead of being alone on Thanksgiving like she thought. What am I supposed to tell her?" For a moment, the familiar guilt rose up, threatening to drown the evening's joy. Then I remembered Imogen's casual cruelty. "You're not invited." My fingers moved across the screen with newfound clarity. "Tell her Grandma went to see beautiful art because I wasn't invited to your dinner. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk when I'm back." I turned off my phone, walked to the window, and looked out at the glittering New York skyline. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. For the first time since Edmund died, I felt fully present in my own life. Tomorrow would bring complications and conversations, no doubt. But tonight, standing alone yet not lonely in this city of infinite possibilities, I realized that sometimes not receiving an invitation is the beginning of the most important journey of all, the one that leads you back to yourself. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily disoriented before remembering where I was. New York, a city I hadn't visited in nearly a decade, not since Edmund and I attended a conference here shortly before his diagnosis. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, showed 17 notifications, more than I typically received in a month. I scrolled through them slowly, sipping the room service coffee I'd indulged in. Most were reactions to my gallery photo. Acquaintances expressing surprise at seeing me in New York, former colleagues commenting on Dominic Thorne's reputation, and several from Warren with escalating urgency. The final message arrived at 2:14 a.m. "Mom, call me when you get this. We need to talk." Instead, I texted him, "Enjoying a quiet morning in New York. We'll call this afternoon." This small act of postponement, putting my own peace before his demand for immediate response, felt quietly revolutionary. A notification from the hotel informed me that someone had left something at the front desk for me. Curious, I dressed and went downstairs to discover a small envelope containing an elegantly simple card. "If you're free, I'm leading a small photography workshop at 11 a.m. Location attached. No obligation. Dominic." I hesitated only briefly before texting the number he'd included. "I'll be there." The workshop took place in an industrial loft space flooded with natural light. A dozen participants, most at least 20 years my junior, milled about examining professional cameras and equipment. I felt immediately out of place, until Dominic spotted me, hesitating near the entrance. "Margot," he called, crossing the room with his distinctive long stride. Excellent. I was hoping you'd come. I'm afraid I didn't bring a proper camera, I admitted, showing him my outdated smartphone. Perfect, he replied unexpectedly. Today's about seeing, not equipment. Most people hide behind their expensive gear, using technology as a substitute for perspective. The workshop wasn't what I expected. Rather than technical instructions about apertures and shutter speeds, Dominic led us through exercises in observation, teaching us to notice how light transformed ordinary objects, how angles revealed unexpected truths, how patience unveiled moments invisible to the rushing eye. Photography isn't about cameras, he told us as we gathered around his work table. It's about attention, about honoring what most people walk past without seeing. I found myself completely absorbed, forgetting everything except the viewfinder of the borrowed camera he'd pressed into my hands. For 3 hours, I focused on shapes and shadows, on capturing rather than being captured by life. When the session ended, Dominic approached as I was returning his camera. Keep it for the weekend, he suggested. New York offers endless subjects. I couldn't possibly. You have a natural eye, he interrupted. Did you know that? Your compositions are instinctive. I laughed, embarrassed yet pleased. You're being kind. I'm being honest. There's a difference. His expression grew thoughtful. Would you join me for lunch? There's a cafe nearby that makes exceptional soup, perfect for a November day. Part of me wanted to refuse out of habit, to make myself smaller, less demanding, less present. But the woman who had posted that photograph last night, who had silenced her phone, who had prioritized her own experience over others' expectations, that woman said yes. The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop, its walls lined with black and white photographs of New York through the decades. We sat by the window, watching pedestrians hurry past in their post-Thanksgiving pursuits. Your son called the gallery this morning, Dominic mentioned casually as our food arrived. I nearly choked on my water. He what? Apparently he found my contact information online. He wanted to confirm whether I was, and I quote, actually spending time with his mother, or if she was fabricating the connection. Heat rushed to my face. I'm mortified. Don't be. I found it rather amusing and revealing. He stirred his soup thoughtfully. I told him that not only were you attending my exhibition as an honored guest, but that your analyses of my Chartres Cathedral series had influenced my entire approach to architectural photography. I couldn't help but smile. You didn't. I most certainly did, along with mentioning that your blog should be required reading in every art history program. His expression turned serious. Margot, why does your son think you would invent knowing me? The question hung between us, uncomfortably direct. I stared into my soup, considering how to answer. Because the mother he knows doesn't spontaneously fly to New York for art exhibitions, I said finally. She doesn't post photos with renowned photographers. She sits quietly at home, available whenever needed but otherwise invisible. And who decided she should be invisible? I did, I suppose. I met his gaze. After Edmund died, I was so focused on not being a burden that I gradually made myself smaller, until being excluded from Thanksgiving dinner seemed like something I should accept without complaint. Dominic's expression darkened. That's what happened? They uninvited you from a family holiday? I nodded, unexpectedly moved by his indignation on my behalf. Well then, he raised his water glass, to becoming visible again. We spent the afternoon walking through Greenwich Village, stopping occasionally for me to experiment with the camera. Dominic was a patient teacher, showing me how to frame a shot, how to wait for the right moment, how to trust my instincts rather than second-guessing every decision. By the time we reached Washington Square Park, something had shifted in me. I felt more grounded in my body, more connected to the world around me, more present. My phone rang as we watched a street performer juggle flaming batons. Warren, for the 4th time today. With a deep breath, I finally answered. Mom, what the hell is going on? His voice was tight with frustration. First you disappear on Thanksgiving, then you're suddenly in New York with some famous photographer, and now you're ignoring my calls? I'm not ignoring you, Warren. I'm living my life. The words came easily, without rehearsal. And yes, I'm in New York with Dominic Thorne. He's been kind enough to show me the city. Is this because of what Imogen said? Because if you're trying to make some point, no, Warren. I cut him off gently but firmly. I'm not trying to make a point. I'm simply doing something that brings me joy instead of sitting alone in an empty apartment. There was a long silence. Are you coming back? His voice had changed, uncertainty replacing anger. Of course I am. On Sunday, as planned. I watched Dominic, who had stepped away to give me privacy, photographing pigeons in flight. We'll talk then, in person. After hanging up, I stood for a moment, letting the sounds of the city wash over me. The Warren I knew would have pressed harder, demanded more explanations, made me justify my choices. This hesitation, this uncertainty in his voice, it was new. Perhaps I wasn't the only one seeing things differently. Dominic returned, studying my expression. Everything all right? I think it might be, I replied, surprising myself with the realization. Eventually. As evening approached, he invited me to a small gallery dinner. Unless you have other plans? I didn't hesitate this time. None at all. Taking a photograph of the setting sun gilding the city skyline, I felt something unfamiliar unfurling inside me. A sense of possibility I'd forgotten existed. For 63 years, I'd lived my life according to other people's expectations. Now at last, I was curious about my own. Sunday arrived with startling swiftness. 3 days in New York had somehow expanded to feel like weeks, each moment dense with new experiences and revelations. I packed my suitcase with reluctance, carefully wrapping the small framed photograph Dominic had given me the night before. A print from his personal collection showing a single chair in an empty cathedral, light streaming through stained glass to create a kaleidoscope on the stone floor. For your new beginning, he'd said when presenting it, his hands lingering on mine during the exchange. Our goodbye at the gallery had been comfortable, yet charged with unspoken possibility. We'd agreed to continue our correspondence, with tentative plans for me to return for his major exhibition in January. Nothing definite, nothing demanded, just an open door where before I'd only seen walls. The flight back to Chicago gave me time to contemplate what awaited me. Warren had texted that he would meet me at my apartment that evening, alone, a specification that spoke volumes about the conversation to come. As the plane descended through clouds into the familiar Chicago skyline, I scrolled through the photographs I'd taken over the weekend, architectural details of buildings I'd passed hundreds of times in previous visits without truly seeing, candid moments captured during my walks with Dominic, and several self-portraits taken at his insistence, images of myself I hardly recognized, alive with engagement and curiosity. A car service, another small luxury I'd never have permitted myself before, delivered me to my building by mid-afternoon. I'd barely finished unpacking when my doorbell rang, 3 hours earlier than Warren had specified. It wasn't Warren at my door, but Imogen, impeccably dressed as always, her expression a careful blend of irritation and false concern. "Margot," she said, stepping past me without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk before Warren arrives." I closed the door slowly, gathering myself. "Hello, Imogen. This is unexpected." She surveyed my living room with that familiar, assessing gaze, as if mentally cataloging everything that needed improvement. "Your trip looks like it was eventful." "It was wonderful, thank you." Her smile tightened. "Look, I'll be direct. This little drama you've created is upsetting Warren and confusing Lily. If you're trying to punish us for Thanksgiving..." "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I interrupted, the firmness in my voice surprising us both. "I made other plans when I was uninvited from your family dinner. That's all. With a strange man. With a respected colleague whose work I've admired for years." Imogen paced to the window, then turned back with practiced composure. "Margot, we both know what this is really about. You've been clinging to Warren ever since Edmund died. It's not healthy, for you or for us." Her words that would have wounded me deeply just days ago, now seemed remarkably transparent. "That's an interesting interpretation." "It's not interpretation. It's fact." She checked her expensive watch. "Warren and I have discussed it extensively with my therapist. Your dependency is creating unhealthy boundaries." "I see." I moved to the kitchen and filled the kettle, needing a moment to process this revelation. "And what does this therapist suggest?" "Clearer boundaries, less frequent contact, maybe even consider relocating to a retirement community where you could make friends your own age." The kettle whistled, its scream matching the momentary flash of anger I felt. I poured water over tea bags with deliberate care. "Would you like some tea, Imogen?" She blinked, thrown by my calm response. "No, Then let me be equally direct." I leaned against the counter, meeting her gaze steadily. I am not dependent on Warren. I have never demanded his time or attention. In fact, I've spent years making myself smaller and less inconvenient to accommodate your preferences. That's not. I declined countless invitations, rearranged my schedule whenever you changed plans last minute, and never complained when visits with my granddaughter were repeatedly canceled. My voice remained even, factual rather than accusatory. I didn't do that out of dependency. I did it because I thought maintaining peace in your household was more important than my own needs. Imogen's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. You're twisting things. No, I'm finally seeing them clearly. I brought my tea to the living room, gesturing for her to sit. I don't want to be your adversary, Imogen. I want a respectful relationship where we can all spend time together without constant tension and manipulation. Manipulation? Her voice rose. That's rich, coming from the woman who deliberately created a holiday spectacle to make us look bad. I posted one photograph, I said quietly. Your reaction to it isn't my responsibility. A key turned in the lock. Warren, using the emergency key I'd given him years ago. He froze in the doorway, taking in the scene before him. Imogen? What are you doing here? His voice held an edge I rarely heard. We agreed I would talk to Mom alone. I thought it would be better if I... No. The single word sliced through her explanation. Go home, please. I'll meet you there later. The look that passed between them spoke volumes about conversations I hadn't been privy to. After a moment of tense silence, Imogen gathered her purse and left without further argument. Another unprecedented occurrence. Warren sank onto my couch, suddenly looking every bit his 32 years, rather than the polished professional he typically presented. I'm sorry about that, he said, running a hand through his hair. She wasn't supposed to come here. I sat across from him, giving him space. It's all right. No, it's not. He looked up, his expression troubled. None of this is all right, Mom. The way Thanksgiving happened, the things Imogen said to you, I should have intervened. His acknowledgement, so unexpected, momentarily robbed me of words. The thing is, he continued, I've gotten so used to keeping the peace that I stopped noticing how much it was costing everyone else, especially you. Warren, please let me finish. He leaned forward, hands clasped. When I saw that photo of you in New York, looking so alive, with this famous photographer treating you like you were something special, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen you that way. And then I thought about how we'd just excluded you from a family holiday like it was nothing, and how you'd probably have spent the day alone if you hadn't gone to New York. And I felt, he swallowed hard, I felt ashamed. The raw honesty in his voice pierced me. I moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in mine. I never wanted you to feel that way, I said softly. I just wanted to be part of your life without being a burden. You've never been a burden. He squeezed my hand. I've just been a coward. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken years between us. So, he finally said, attempting lightness, tell me about this photographer, Dominic Thorne. Are you two involved? I smiled, appreciating his effort. We're exploring possibilities. Wow. He shook his head, a small smile forming. My mother, dating a famous photographer. Lily's going to think that's way cooler than anything Imogen's mother does. The mention of my granddaughter brought a pang. How is Lily? Is she truly upset about the photograph? Honestly? She thought it was amazing that you were in New York having adventures instead of being at boring dinner with Grandma Vivienne. His impression of a 5-year-old's voice made me laugh. She wants to hear all about it. She's been asking when you'll come see her. Something loosened in my chest at his words. I'd like that very much. Tomorrow? He suggested. I could pick you up after work, bring you to the house for dinner. Imogen will be civil. I've made that very clear. The old Margot would have accepted instantly, gratefully. The new Margot considered her own schedule, her own needs. Wednesday would be better for me, I said. I have a department meeting tomorrow that might run late. Warren nodded, accepting my boundary without question. Another small but significant shift. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Mom, are you really coming back to New York in January for his exhibition? I'm considering it. Why? Because... He hesitated. I think it might be good for you. You seem different. In a good way. After he left, I moved to my desk and opened my laptop, where an email from Dominic awaited. The gallery feels emptier without your perspective, he'd written. When might New York see you again? As I typed my response, confirming my January visit, I glanced at the photograph now hanging on my wall. That single empty chair, awash in colored light, waiting for someone to claim it. For the first time in years, I was answering that invitation on my own terms. December transformed Chicago into a glittering snow globe, the city embracing its reputation for dramatic winters with characteristic determination. I found myself experiencing the familiar holiday season through newly awakened senses, noticing the artful arrangement of lights along Michigan Avenue, appreciating the architectural details of buildings I'd passed for decades without truly seeing, capturing moments with my new camera, a proper one I'd purchased after returning from New York. My dinner with Warren, Lily, and Imogen had unfolded better than expected. Imogen maintained a civil if cool demeanor, while Lily's unbridled excitement about my New York adventure created a buffer against lingering tension. By evening's end, we'd established a standing weekly dinner engagement, a small but meaningful victory. Most surprising was my rediscovered relationship with my granddaughter. Without Imogen's filtering presence, Lily revealed herself to be a perceptive, curious child with a natural eye for beauty, qualities I'd glimpsed but never fully appreciated during our carefully supervised previous visits. "Grandma, look!" she exclaimed during our first solo outing, pointing to how ice crystals had formed patterns on a store window. "It's like one of your photographs." I'd begun sharing my new photography interest with her, showing her how to frame shots on an old digital camera Warren had unearthed from their closet for her use. Our Saturday morning photo safaris quickly became sacred time. 2 hours each weekend when we'd explore different Chicago neighborhoods, capturing images that interested us. "You know what I like about taking pictures?" Lily confided during one such expedition, her small face serious beneath her woolen hat. "Nobody can tell you you're seeing wrong. If I think something's beautiful, I can take its picture, and that makes it true." Her simple wisdom often left me momentarily speechless. My correspondence with Dominic continued daily, sometimes brief notes exchanged between his busy shooting schedule and my end-of-semester grading marathon, sometimes lengthy evening discussions via video calls that stretched until midnight. We carefully navigated this undefined relationship, neither of us rushing to categorize what was developing between us. "Labels are for exhibition catalogs, not human connections," he remarked during one such call. "I'm rather enjoying discovering who Margot Sinclair is, without preconceptions about what we're supposed to be to each other." This approach, this freedom from expectations, felt revolutionary. For most of my adult life, I'd been defined by my relationships to others: professor, wife, mother, widow, grandmother. Now, approaching my 64th birthday, I was simply becoming Margot, a woman with her own perspectives, desires, and boundaries. Not everyone appreciated this evolution. "You've changed," Vivian Holloway observed during an unexpected encounter at a department store where I was shopping for a more stylish winter coat than my practical parka. Imogen's mother, impeccable as always in designer winter wear, assessed me with that familiar calculating gaze shared by mother and daughter. "Yes," I agreed simply, not elaborating. She fingered the sleeve of the burgundy wool coat I was considering. "Quite a bold choice. Special occasion?" "No, I just like the color." Her perfectly maintained eyebrows rose slightly. "I heard you're flying back to New York next month for that photographer's exhibition." The Chicago social grapevine never ceased to amaze me. "That's right. Imogen is concerned." Her tone suggested this should matter tremendously to me. "She thinks you're having some sort of late-life crisis." I couldn't help but laugh. "Is that what exploring new interests is called at my age?" "Don't be flippant, Margot. We're just concerned about Lily becoming attached to this situation that might not last." The manipulation was so transparent, I almost admired its audacity. "Lily is attached to me, her grandmother. My friendship with Dominic doesn't change that." "Friendship," she repeated skeptically. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" I met her gaze directly. "They call it whatever the people involved choose to call it, Vivian. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to buy this coat." As I walked away, I heard her murmur, "Edmund would hardly recognize you anymore." The comment was designed to wound, to invoke my late husband as an ally in her disapproval. Instead, it struck me as profoundly true and liberating. Edmund had loved a different Margot, one who hadn't yet learned to claim her space in the world. He would indeed find me changed, but knowing the man who had always encouraged me to pursue my passions, I suspected he would approve. The night before my January departure for New York, Warren and Lily came to my apartment for dinner. Imogen had begged off with a conveniently timed work commitment. "We brought you something," Lily announced, presenting a carefully wrapped package with solemn ceremony. "It's for your trip." Inside was a handmade book, its cover declaring Grandma Margot's Big Adventure in Lily's distinctive printing. Each page contained photographs we'd taken together during our Saturday expeditions, alongside her illustrations and Warren's neat captions describing our outings. "So, you don't forget us when you're with your camera friend," Lily explained, watching my face anxiously. "Oh, sweetheart." I gathered her close, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair. "I could never forget you. You're my favorite photography partner." Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on my couch, Warren helped me wash dishes in a companionable silence that reminded me of earlier, easier times between us. "She worked on that book for weeks," he said finally. "It was her idea. She wanted you to have something to show your friend in New York." "It's perfect," I replied, throat tight with emotion. "I'll treasure it." He dried his hands, then turned to face me. "Mom, I need to say something about Imogen." I tensed, preparing for another round of peacekeeping. "She's struggling with all this," he said carefully, "with the new you, but she's trying, in her way." "Is she?" I kept my tone neutral. "We've been in counseling since Thanksgiving, not just with her therapist, but with someone new, someone more objective." He leaned against the counter. "It's been eye-opening, for both of us. This was unexpected news." "I'm glad to hear that, Warren." "The thing is," he continued, "Imogen grew up thinking relationships were about control. That's what she saw between her parents, what Vivian modeled for her. She's realizing now that's not healthy." I absorbed this, recognizing the olive branch he was extending. "Change takes time and effort." "Yes," he met my gaze, "but seeing you change, seeing how you've become more yourself instead of less, it's made an impression on her, on both of us." After they left, I finished packing for my trip with a strange mixture of emotions: excitement about returning to New York, seeing Dominic, experiencing his exhibition, gratitude for the unexpected healing beginning between Warren and me, and beneath it all, a quiet certainty that regardless of what awaited me in New York, I was no longer the same woman who had boarded that impulsive flight on Thanksgiving. That night, I dreamt of Edmund for the first time in months. Not the dying Edmund of my usual dreams, but the vital man I'd first fallen in love with, eyes crinkled with laughter as he gestured toward an open road ahead. "You're doing fine, Margot," he said in the dream. "Just fine." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but a lightness in my heart, understanding that his approval had never been in question. The only permission I'd ever needed was my own. As my flight lifted above the cloud cover the next morning, I opened Lily's handmade book, smiling at her whimsical illustrations. On the final page, she'd drawn a picture of me standing beside a tall figure labeled cameraman, both of us holding what appeared to be cameras and smiling enormous grins. Beneath it, in her careful printing, Grandma Margot's not invisible anymore. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. January in New York greeted me with biting winds and pewter skies, the post-holiday city stripped of its festive decorations, but pulsing with its characteristic energy. This time, Dominic met me at the airport himself, his tall figure immediately recognizable among the crowd of waiting drivers and families. "Welcome back," he said simply, taking my suitcase with one hand while his other briefly touched my shoulder, a restrained gesture that nonetheless sent warmth through me despite the winter chill. The Prisma Gallery had arranged accommodations in a small boutique hotel within walking distance, a consideration that touched me deeply. As we drove through the congested streets, Dominic filled me in on the exhibition preparations, his normally calm demeanor showing hints of the nervous energy that preceded any major artistic unveiling. "The final installation happens tonight," he explained. "The lighting is particularly crucial for this collection. I'd value your perspective if you're not too tired from traveling." I smiled at his careful phrasing, an invitation without pressure, respecting my autonomy while expressing his desire for my company. I'd love to see it taking shape. The gallery after hours was transformed, ladders and lighting equipment scattered throughout, staff in casual clothes rather than the sleek black attire of opening nights, the hushed reverence replaced by focused activity. Dominic introduced me to his team not as a visitor, but as a consultant, someone whose opinion mattered. Professor Sinclair's understanding of how light interacts with architectural elements has been instrumental in developing this collection, he told his curator, a stylish woman named Renata, who regarded me with new interest after his endorsement. For the next several hours, I found myself fully engaged in the exhibition's final preparations, offering perspectives on lighting angles, photograph placement, and the visitor flow through the space. What struck me most was how seriously my input was taken, not merely tolerated as the comments of the artist's guest, but considered and often implemented. "You have an exceptional spatial awareness," Renata commented as we adjusted the position of a particularly striking photograph of an abandoned Soviet observatory. "Many academics understand theory, but lack practical application. You bridge that gap." By midnight, exhaustion finally overcame excitement. Dominic noticed my flagging energy before I mentioned it, smoothly arranging for a car to take me to the hotel while he finished the final adjustments with his team. "Rest well," he said, walking me to the car. "Tomorrow begins the madness." In my hotel room, I found a small package waiting, a vintage book on early architectural photography with a simple note, "For the woman who taught me to see differently, D." The gesture, thoughtful rather than extravagant, exemplified what made my connection with Dominic so refreshing. Unlike the performative romance of flowers or jewelry, he offered something that acknowledged my mind, my interests, my perspective. I fell asleep reading the book, waking the next morning to a text from Lily that Warren had helped her send. "Good luck with your pictures today, Grandma." Attached was a drawing of what appeared to be a gallery opening, with stick figures holding tiny wine glasses. The exhibition preview for critics and special guests began at 4 p.m. Dominic had arranged for me to arrive early, before the crowds descended. When I entered the gallery, now transformed into a polished showcase, he was adjusting a spotlight, his back to the entrance. "What do you think?" he asked without turning, somehow sensing my presence. I took my time, moving through the space slowly, absorbing the full impact of the collection. Titled Forgotten Light, the exhibition featured structures abandoned by civilization but not by time. Observatories, cathedrals, lighthouses, theaters, each captured in moments when natural light transformed them from ruins into revelations. "It's extraordinary," I said finally, meaning it. "You've made absence feel like presence." He turned then, his expression softening. "That's exactly what I hope to achieve." Our eyes held for a moment, the unspoken understanding between us deepening. Then the gallery doors opened, admitting the first wave of New York's art elite, and our private moment dissolved into the public persona Dominic effortlessly assumed. What I hadn't anticipated was that he would insist on introducing me to everyone, not as a friend or companion, but as an influence on his work. Time and again, he directed conversations toward my perspectives, citing my blog posts and our discussions about the interplay of light and architecture. Margot's analysis of how Gothic cathedral architects manipulated light completely changed how I approached the Chartres sequence, he told the critic from The New Yorker, gesturing toward a striking image of sunlight piercing through a damaged roof onto a weathered altar. By evening's end, several critics had taken my contact information. A gallery owner from Boston had inquired about my interest in writing an essay for their upcoming architectural exhibition catalog, and Renata had subtly suggested the possibility of me guest curating a future show at Prisma. "You've become quite the sensation," Dominic observed as the last guests departed, leaving us alone in the gallery with a few staff members dismantling the refreshment table. "How does it feel to be discovered at 63? I laughed, the champagne I'd sipped throughout the evening creating a pleasant warmth, like wearing clothes that actually fit after years of trying to squeeze into the wrong size. His answering smile contained a tenderness that made my heart quicken. "Shall we celebrate properly? I know a quiet place nearby where we can actually hear ourselves think." The quiet place proved to be his apartment, a converted industrial loft not unlike his photography studio, but warmer, filled with books, artifacts from his travels, and photographs unlike his commercial work, more intimate, more experimental. "You live above the gallery?" I asked, accepting the glass of wine he offered. The building was a printing factory in its previous life. When I purchased it for the gallery, the upper floors were raw space. He gestured around the open loft. "I renovated this level as a refuge from hotel rooms. I spend so much time traveling that having a consistent home base became important." I moved to a wall, displaying a series of black and white photographs, landscapes without human figures, but bearing evidence of human passage. These are different from your exhibition work. They're not for public consumption. He stood beside me, studying the images. Photography began as my private language, a way of processing what I couldn't articulate in words. The commercial work came later. Why show them to me? He considered this, swirling his wine thoughtfully. Because you see beyond the surface. Because you understand that absence can be presence. Because he set down his glass and turned to face me directly. Because I find myself wanting you to know me, Margot. Not the photographer whose books you've studied, or the artist the critics discuss, but me. The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep within me. For months we had circled each other with intellectual connection, artistic appreciation, and carefully controlled attraction. This moment felt like a threshold crossing. I want that too, I admitted, setting aside my own glass. To know you, to be known. When he kissed me, it wasn't with the hesitant awkwardness I might have expected after decades of marriage to one man. There was certainty in his touch, and a patience that spoke of a man comfortable with taking time to discover another person properly. Later, lying in his bed with city lights filtering through industrial windows, I experienced a moment of breathtaking clarity. At 63, I was not ending, but beginning. Not settling, but exploring. Not diminishing, but expanding. What are you thinking? Dominic asked, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. That I've spent most of my life being careful, I replied honestly. Careful not to take up too much space. Careful not to inconvenience anyone. Careful not to want too much. He propped himself on one elbow, studying my face in the half-light. And now? Now I'm learning how to be careless in all the right ways. His smile, the private one I was discovering belonged only to intimate moments, creased his face. Carelessness becomes you, Professor Sinclair. My phone chimed from the bedside table. Another text from Warren. How was the opening? Lily wants to know if your photographs were a big success. Dominic glanced at the message. Your son checks in often. Another new development, I explained, typing a brief reply. We're rebuilding. Slowly. And his wife? The one who uninvited you at Thanksgiving? I set the phone down, considering. She's adjusting to the new reality where I don't simply accommodate whatever makes her comfortable. Good, he said simply, pulling me closer. Because I'm rather fond of this unaccommodating version of you. As I drifted towards sleep in this unexpected place, I marveled at how thoroughly a single rejected invitation had redirected the course of my life. Sometimes, it seemed, the best journeys begin with a door closing rather than opening. The exhibition's public opening the following evening transformed the gallery into a buzzing hive of New York's art community. I watched from a quiet corner as Dominic navigated the crowd with practiced ease, somehow managing to make each person feel momentarily like the focus of his attention while never becoming trapped in a single conversation. He's different with you here, Renata observed, appearing beside me with 2 champagne flutes, more centered. I accepted the offered glass. He seems perfectly at ease to me. She smiled knowingly. Dominic has always been good at appearing comfortable. It's his actual comfort I'm referring to. She nodded toward where he stood, discussing a photograph with a young couple. Notice how he keeps glancing your way, making sure you're still here? I hadn't noticed, but now that she mentioned it, I caught his eyes seeking mine across the room. A small private smile crossing his face when our gazes met before he returned his attention to his patrons. How long have you worked with him? I asked, curious about this woman who clearly knew him well. 7 years, she replied. Long enough to have seen every iteration of his public persona and most versions of his private one. She studied me over the rim of her glass. He's never brought anyone into his creative process before. Not like this. Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. A television crew was setting up equipment, directed by a polished woman in a crimson dress who scanned the room with the precision of a predatory bird. Wonderful, Renata muttered. Vivian Westcott from Art Scene. Just what we need. Problem? I asked, noting her suddenly tense posture. She and Dominic have history. Renata's diplomatic phrasing couldn't disguise her discomfort. She's built her reputation on provocative interviews that create drama rather than insight. Across the room, I saw Dominic register the crew's presence, his expression momentarily tightening before his professional mask returned. He excused himself from his conversation and made his way toward us with purpose. Renata, Please tell me you didn't approve broadcast media, he said quietly when he reached us. She shook her head. Gallery owner's prerogative. Apparently, Ms. Westcott's viewing figures are too valuable to refuse. He sighed, then turned to me. Margot, I should warn you. Dominic! The crimson-dressed woman materialized beside us, camera crew tactfully hanging back, but positioned to capture the encounter. What a stunning evolution from your last collection. So much more emotional depth. Her gaze shifted to me with calculated interest. And who's this? Vivian, he acknowledged with professional courtesy but unmistakable coolness. This is Professor Margot Sinclair, an architectural historian whose insights significantly influenced this collection. Professor Sinclair, she extended a manicured hand. How fascinating. Might I borrow Dominic for a brief interview about the exhibition? I promised to return him promptly. It wasn't really a request. As they moved away, Renata touched my elbow. Don't worry, she murmured. Dominic knows how to handle her. But perhaps this would be a good time to view the second gallery? It's quieter. I allowed her to guide me away, grateful for her intervention, but unsettled by the encounter. In the adjoining space, featuring Dominic's studies of abandoned theaters, I tried to lose myself in the photographs while occasionally glimpsing the interview through the doorway. Vivian's body language spoke volumes. The subtle touches on Dominic's arm, the intimacy of her posture, the performative laughter. Whatever their history entailed, it clearly remained unresolved on at least one side. They were engaged briefly, came a voice beside me, a young assistant I recognized from installation day. Years ago, before my time, but gallery gossip has a long shelf life. I didn't ask, I said, more sharply than intended. He flushed. Sorry, I thought... Never mind. Can I get you anything? Water? No, thank you. I softened my tone, recognizing my reaction as disproportionate. I'm fine. But I wasn't entirely fine. I was experiencing an emotion I hadn't felt in decades. Jealousy. Not the mature concern of an adult relationship, but the visceral, adolescent variety that constricts your chest and makes your palms sweat. It was ridiculous. I was a 63-year-old widow with grown children, not a teenager at her first dance. Yet watching this glamorous woman with her obvious history with Dominic triggered every insecurity I'd thought I'd moved beyond. My age, my academic rather than artistic background, my Midwestern sensibilities in this sophisticated New York environment. You look like you could use some air, Renata reappeared, casting a knowing glance toward the interview still underway. The roof deck is open. Shall we? The January night was brutally cold, but the rooftop offered blessed solitude and a spectacular view of the Manhattan skyline. I wrapped my borrowed gallery coat tighter, breathing deeply. Don't let Vivian get to you, Renata advised, lighting a cigarette. Her tactics are predictable. Dredge up personal history during professional interviews, create tension that makes for compelling television, move on to the next target. It's not my concern, I said automatically. Renata's laugh was warm but knowing. Of course it is. You care about him. I didn't deny it. I'm being ridiculous. Whatever happened between them was long before I entered the picture. 15 years ago, she confirmed. Ancient history to everyone except Vivian, who periodically tries to rekindle things whenever they cross paths professionally. She exhaled a plume of smoke that disappeared into the night air. But I've never seen him look at her the way he looks at you. Before I could respond, the roof access door opened, and Dominic emerged, scanning the space until he spotted us. There you are, he said, joining us at the railing. I've been looking everywhere. Giving your interview? I asked, striving for a neutral tone. Enduring it, he corrected, his expression weary. Vivian specializes in mining the past for dramatic effect rather than discussing the actual work. Renata tactfully excused herself, leaving us alone on the roof. For a moment, we stood in silence, watching the city lights. You're upset, he observed finally. I'm processing, I countered. There's a difference. Ah, he nodded slowly. Processing the fact that I have a past that occasionally shows up in crimson dresses to remind me of youthful mistakes. Despite myself, I smiled. Something like that. He turned to face me fully. Margot, I've lived 55 years on this planet. I've had relationships that ended badly, some that ended well, and long periods of solitude in between. What I've never had is someone who sees me. The work, yes, but more importantly, the intention behind it. The simple honesty in his voice dispelled my unease. I'm not accustomed to feeling possessive. It surprised me. If it helps, I find your possessiveness far more appealing than Vivian's calculated attempts to provoke it. He moved closer, his warmth welcome in the winter air. Now, shall we return to the exhibition, or would you prefer to escape? I've technically fulfilled my obligations for the evening. The thought of returning to the crowded gallery, possibly facing more encounters with people from Dominic's past, held little appeal. Escape sounds perfect. We left discreetly through a service entrance, emerging onto a quiet side street where yellow cabs streamed past. Dominic hailed one with practiced efficiency. "Where to?" the driver asked. Dominic looked at me, a question in his eyes. In that moment, I made a decision. To embrace the spontaneity that had brought me to New York in the first place. "Surprise me," I told him. His smile, the private one I was coming to treasure, illuminated his face as he gave the driver an address I didn't recognize. As the taxi merged into traffic, he took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "You continue to astonish me, Professor Sinclair." "Good," I replied, squeezing his hand. "I'm rather enjoying astonishing myself as well." The cab carried us away from the gallery, away from Vivian Westcott and her calculated provocations, away from the carefully curated persona of Dominic Thorne, renowned photographer, and towards something more authentic. Two people discovering each other in middle age with the wisdom to appreciate the rarity of their connection. Whatever insecurities had momentarily gripped me on the roof began to dissolve. I was not competing with Dominic's past. I was participating in his present. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was fully, uncompromisingly present in my own life as well. The woman who had meekly accepted being uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner seemed to belong to another lifetime, a ghost I had finally, definitively laid to rest. February in Chicago brought record snowfall, transforming the city into a treacherous landscape of ice-slicked streets and towering drifts. After returning from New York, I found myself surprisingly content with this enforced hibernation, using the quiet hours to develop my photographs and reflect on the shifting terrain of my life. The exhibition had been an unqualified success, with reviews praising Dominic's revelatory exploration of abandoned spaces and his masterful manipulation of natural light to resurrect forgotten beauty. Several mentioned the influence of architectural theory on his work, citing my name with a respect that still startled me when I saw it in print. More surprising was the invitation that had arrived last week, a formal request from the Chicago Institute of Art for me to curate a small exhibition on the relationship between architecture and photography, featuring not only selections from established artists like Dominic, but also my own emerging work. "They want me to include my photographs," I told Freya Zaman over coffee in her university office. Me, a complete novice with no formal training. Freya, my closest friend and confidant through the tumultuous months since Thanksgiving, smiled knowingly. "Perhaps they recognize that your academic background gives you a unique perspective. Not every photographer understands the historical and theoretical context of architectural spaces like you do." "Or perhaps Dominic pulled some strings," I countered, still uncomfortable with the idea that my connection to him might be influencing professional opportunities. "Does it matter?" She leaned forward, fixing me with her therapist's penetrating gaze. "Even if he opened a door, they wouldn't have invited you if they didn't value what you bring through it. Take the win, Margot." Taking wins remained a surprisingly difficult skill to master after decades of self-effacement. Even now, with Warren and I rebuilding our relationship, my professional horizons expanding, and Dominic's steady presence in my life, albeit often at a geographic distance, I still found myself fighting the instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make myself convenient rather than consequential. "Speaking of wins," Freya continued, "how are things with the family? Any improvement with Imogen?" I sighed, considering my response carefully. "It's complicated. We've established a fragile peace. She's civil when I visit, which is progress. Warren says their counseling is helping, but there's still tension. And Lily." At the mention of my granddaughter, I couldn't suppress a smile. "Thriving. She's developed a genuine passion for photography. Warren brings her to my place every Saturday morning for our photo safaris, regardless of weather. And Imogen allows this without resistance? That's the strangest part. It was her suggestion." I still remembered my shock when Warren had conveyed this unexpected olive branch. Apparently, their therapist recommended supporting Lily's interests even when they involve me. Some breakthrough about controlling tendencies and generational patterns they're trying to break. Freya nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like genuine effort. Progress isn't always comfortable, even when it's positive, for any of you. Her words resonated with my own experience these past months. Every step toward a more authentic life had brought both liberation and discomfort. From establishing boundaries with my family, to exploring intimacy with Dominic, to presenting my creative work for public scrutiny. I never expected change to feel so destabilizing, I admitted. Even the good changes. That's because real change isn't just about adding new elements to an existing structure. It's about dismantling parts of the foundation and rebuilding. Freya checked her watch reluctantly. I hate to cut this short, but I have a faculty meeting in 10 minutes. As we parted ways outside her building, she hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, you know. Not many people have the courage to reinvent themselves at our age. Her words stayed with me during my walk home through the snow-hushed campus. Had I reinvented myself, or simply uncovered someone who had been there all along, buried beneath decades of accommodation and compromise? My phone vibrated with a text from Dominic. Just landed in Chicago. Dinner tonight? His surprise visit sent a thrill through me that belied my age. We'd established a rhythm of sorts since the exhibition. 2 weeks apart, 1 week together, alternating between Chicago and New York, with regular video calls during separations. Neither of us had pushed for more defined arrangements, both valuing our independence too much to rush toward conventional commitments. That evening, over dinner at my apartment, I shared the exhibition invitation and my conflicted feelings about it. They're interested in your perspective, not your connection to me, Dominic assured me, refilling our wine glasses. I was as surprised as you when the curator contacted me about it. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. You didn't mention me to anyone at the Chicago Institute? I didn't need to. His expression was serious. Your blog posts about the exhibition were circulated widely in the art photography community. Your unique analysis of how I've employed architectural principles in composition caught attention on its own merits. The possibility that my writing had created opportunities independently of Dominic's influence was simultaneously empowering and terrifying. I'm not sure I'm ready for this level of visibility. And yet you've already stepped into the light, he observed. Your photographs from our New York weekend were remarkable, precisely because they came from an untrained eye, guided by trained perception. That combination is rare and valuable. Later, as we lay tangled together in my bed, another area where I discovered unexpected confidence and joy, I confessed my deepest fear. What if I'm just experiencing some textbook late-life crisis? What if all of this, the photography, the writing, even us, is just a desperate attempt to feel relevant again? Dominic propped himself on one elbow, his expression thoughtful in the dim light. Does it matter? If these pursuits bring you joy and fulfillment, if they allow you to express parts of yourself that were previously silenced, does the psychological categorization change their value? His question cut through my anxiety with surgical precision. I suppose not. For what it's worth, he continued, I've witnessed many colleagues go through genuine midlife crises, buying sports cars, pursuing inappropriately young partners, making dramatic career changes they immediately regret. What you're doing feels different. More like reclamation than crisis. Reclamation, I repeated, considering the word. I like that. The next morning brought another snowfall and an unexpected text from Imogen. Lily has a school presentation on important women in my life next Friday. She wants you there. 2 p.m. at Lakeside Elementary. Can you make it? The invitation. The first direct communication from Imogen that wasn't filtered through Warren or laden with passive-aggressive undertones stunned me. I stared at my phone, trying to process this unexpected development. Good news? Dominic asked, emerging from the shower with a towel wrapped around his waist. I showed him the message wordlessly. Ah, he said, understanding immediately. An actual invitation, rather different from Thanksgiving. I'm not sure how to respond, I admitted. Part of me wants to be unavailable just to make a point. And the other part? Wants to be there for Lily without questioning Imogen's motives. He sat beside me, still damp from his shower. What would the old Margot do? Rearrange her entire schedule without hesitation, arrive early, sit quietly in the back, thank Imogen profusely for the opportunity, and minimize her presence to avoid creating tension. And the new Margot? I considered this carefully. The new Margot would check her actual availability, respond honestly, attend proudly if she can make it, and neither apologize for her presence nor diminish her importance in Lily's life. His smile was answer enough. I picked up my phone and typed, "I'd be honored. I have a department meeting until 1:30 but can come directly after. Thank you for letting me know." Simple, direct, neither groveling nor retaliatory. A response from a woman who knew her own value, to herself, to her granddaughter, and yes, even to her difficult daughter-in-law, who might, against all odds, be capable of growth too. As I set down my phone, I caught sight of us in the bedroom mirror, Dominic with his silver hair and artist's hands, me with my morning dishevelment and newfound confidence, an unlikely pair finding each other at an age when society expected us to fade quietly into irrelevance. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "That sometimes the most profound revolutions begin with the smallest invitations," I replied, "or the lack thereof." Lily's school presentation proved more significant than I anticipated. Standing at the back of the colorfully decorated classroom, having arrived exactly on time, neither early to appear eager nor late to seem dismissive, I watched my granddaughter confidently address her classmates. "This is my Grandma Margot," she announced, pointing to a surprisingly flattering photograph of me taken during one of our weekend excursions. "She teaches people about buildings at the university, and she takes pictures that show things most people don't see. She's teaching me to look for beauty in unexpected places." The simple description brought unexpected tears to my eyes. As I blinked them away, I noticed Imogen watching me from across the room, her expression unreadable. When Lily finished her presentation, which also featured her mother, who knows everything about helping companies tell their stories, and her teacher Ms. Davis, Imogen approached me with measured steps. "She insisted you be included," she said, without preamble. "Worked on that part of her presentation for days." I nodded, unsure how to respond to this neutral statement that nonetheless felt loaded with unspoken meaning. "She talks about your photography outings constantly," Imogen continued, her tone carefully controlled. "Warren says you've sparked a genuine interest. Our walls are covered with her attempts to capture unexpected beauty in the most mundane objects." "She has a natural eye," I replied, matching her neutral tone. An awkward silence stretched between us, broken finally by Imogen's abrupt question. "Would you join us for dinner on Sunday? Nothing fancy, just the family?" The invitation, so unexpected, momentarily robbed me of speech. Was this a peace offering? A test? Some strategy suggested by their therapist? "I'd like that," I said simply, deciding that overthinking her motives was unnecessary. "What time?" 6. "Warren will text you the details." She hesitated, then added with visible effort, "Lily would love to show you her new room decorations. We've reorganized things a bit." Later that evening, discussing the interaction with Dominic via video call, he had returned to New York for a commercial assignment, I struggled to interpret the significance of this development. "Maybe there's no deeper meaning," he suggested, his voice slightly distorted by the connection. "Maybe it's just a dinner invitation? From Imogen, the woman who specifically uninvited me from Thanksgiving?" I shook my head. Nothing is ever just anything with her. Perhaps she's genuinely trying to change. People sometimes do, especially when confronted with the consequences of their actions. His reasonable perspective calmed my swirling thoughts. "You're right. I should approach it without expectations, positive or negative." "Wise woman," he murmured. "Speaking of expectations, I have news." The slight shift in his tone immediately captured my attention. "What kind of news? The Lisbon project I mentioned? It's moving forward more quickly than anticipated. They want me there for the preliminary scouting next week, with the actual shoot scheduled for April through June." "That's wonderful," I said, meaning it despite the pang of disappointment at what this would mean for our carefully balanced arrangement of time, together and apart. 3 months in Portugal sounds extraordinary. It would be. He paused, his image freezing momentarily before the connection stabilized. "I was hoping you might consider joining me, at least for part of it." The suggestion hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us had previously broached. 3 months was not a casual visit. It suggested a level of commitment we'd carefully avoided defining. "I have teaching obligations," I said reflexively. "The semester ends in early May," he countered gently. "And you mentioned possibly taking a sabbatical next year." He'd been listening, really listening to my casual mentions of future possibilities. The realization both touched and terrified me. "It's a significant step," I said finally. "It is," he agreed without pressure. "Think about it. No rush to decide." But as we ended our call, the question lingered. What was holding me back? Fear of the unknown? Concern about family obligations? Or something deeper? The habit of making myself smaller, of placing others' needs before my own, of believing I didn't deserve expansive experiences. Sunday dinner at Warren and Imogen's house offered no clarity. The evening progressed with a surreal normalcy, Lily eagerly showing me her room, now decorated with her photographs, including several taken during our outings, Warren grilling with unexpected skill, Imogen maintaining a civil, if somewhat strained, hospitality. It wasn't until after dinner, while Warren and Lily were selecting a board game in the living room, that Imogen addressed me directly in the kitchen, where I was helping with dishes. "Warren says you might go to Portugal." Her tone was casual, but her grip on the wine glass she was drying betrayed tension. "It's a possibility," I replied carefully. "Nothing decided yet." She nodded, placing the glass in the cabinet with deliberate precision. 3 months is a long time to be away from family. The old Margot would have immediately reassured her, would have minimized the possibility, would have prioritized family expectations over personal opportunity. But that woman was becoming increasingly difficult to resurrect. "It is," I agreed neutrally. "Though in our digital age, distance isn't what it once was." Imogen turned to face me directly, her professional composure momentarily slipping. "Lily would miss your Saturday outings. I would miss them too," I said honestly. "But I'd also be giving her something valuable. The example of a grandmother who doesn't limit herself, who embraces new experiences even when they're intimidating." Something flickered in Imogen's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or reluctant respect. "The therapist says I have control issues, that I've been trying to manage everyone's relationships to create some illusion of perfect family harmony." The unexpected vulnerability startled me. "Family harmony isn't a bad goal. Not when it's genuine," she conceded. "But apparently my version involves everyone conforming to my expectations rather than actually connecting authentically." She smiled tightly. "At least according to Dr. Harrison." "Change is hard," I offered, surprising myself with genuine empathy for this woman who had caused me significant pain. "I'm still learning how to claim space without apologizing for it." "You're doing a remarkable job," she said with unexpected sincerity. "Lily notices. She told her therapist she wants to be brave like Grandma Margot when she grows up." This revelation struck me with physical force. "She has a therapist?" "We all do now," Imogen admitted with a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Separately and together. It's exhausting but necessary." She hesitated, then added quietly, "I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. It was cruel and unnecessary." The apology, so long awaited yet now unexpected, left me momentarily speechless. "Thank you for saying that. If Portugal is what you want," she continued, visibly struggling with each word, "you should go. We'll manage. Maybe even plan a visit if you stay long enough." Later that night, alone in my apartment, I sat at my desk contemplating the transformation of my life since that cold November day when I'd been so casually excluded from the family table. In just 3 months, I had reclaimed my professional voice, discovered a creative passion, found an unexpected partner, and now, most improbably, received an actual apology from Imogen. I opened my laptop and typed a brief email to my department chair, inquiring about the possibility of arranging a partial sabbatical for the fall semester. Then I texted Dominic. "Lisbon sounds wonderful. Let's discuss details when you're back." His response came immediately. "You continue to surprise me, Professor Sinclair." I smiled, recognizing the pleasant truth in his words. I continued to surprise myself as well. On my bedside table sat a small framed photograph Lily had taken during our last outing. A simple image of my hands holding my camera, wrinkled but strong, captured in the moment of creating rather than conceding. Beside it lay the exhibition invitation from the Chicago Institute now accepted and my plane ticket for next week's trip to New York. Not bad for a woman who, 4 months ago, had meekly accepted being told, "You're not invited." Lisbon in May unfolded before me like a vivid dream, a city of light so distinctive from Chicago or New York that it felt like stepping into another dimension entirely. The Portuguese capital cascaded down its 7 hills toward the expansive Tagus River, its ancient streets both narrow and infinite in their possibilities. I had arrived 2 weeks ago, after completing my spring semester obligations and entrusting my modest exhibition preparations to a capable graduate assistant. Dominic had already been in Portugal for a month, scouting locations for his ambitious project documenting the country's architectural contrasts, from crumbling medieval structures to cutting-edge contemporary designs. "It's about juxtaposition," he'd explained when first describing the project. "The visual conversation between centuries, sometimes within a single frame." Our reunion at the airport had been surprisingly emotional. After months of alternating between intense togetherness and productive separation, this extended period apart had confirmed something I'd been slowly acknowledging. What existed between us had evolved beyond casual companionship into something I had never expected to experience again at this stage of life. The apartment he'd rented for us in the Alfama district became our shared sanctuary, a centuries-old building with thick stone walls and modern renovations, its terrace offering breathtaking views across the city's terracotta rooftops to the gleaming river beyond. I spent mornings exploring the neighborhood while Dominic attended production meetings, afternoons joining him at various shooting locations, and evenings discussing the day's discoveries over local wine and seafood at tiny restaurants where no one knew or cared who we were. "You're flourishing here," he observed one evening as we lingered over dinner at a family-owned tavern, tucked away on a winding cobblestone street. "There's a lightness to you that grows stronger each day." I considered this, sipping the Vinho Verde that had become my preferred accompaniment to Portugal's extraordinary seafood. "I think it's the combination of freedom and purpose. I'm not defined by anyone's expectations here. Not as a professor, a mother, a grandmother, or even as your partner. I'm just present." "The privilege of elsewhere," he suggested. "Sometimes we need geographical distance to achieve emotional clarity." That clarity extended to my photography, which had evolved from amateur experimentation to increasingly confident expression. Lisbon's distinctive light, crystalline and golden, reflecting off the river and the city's predominant white and yellow buildings, offered endless inspiration. I found myself particularly drawn to doorways and windows, the thresholds between public and private spaces, open and closed possibilities. My daily photographs, shared on my increasingly popular blog, had drawn unexpected attention. The Chicago exhibition curator had requested permission to include several Lisbon images, and a small Portuguese cultural magazine had contacted me about featuring my work alongside an interview about the American professor's perspective on Lisbon light. Meanwhile, my relationship with Warren and his family continued its careful evolution across the Atlantic. Weekly video calls with Lily became a cherished routine, her excitement about Grandma's big adventure a balm against the distance. More surprising were the occasional text exchanges with Imogen, brief but civil messages that sometimes included photographs of Lily's own photographic efforts. "She's organized her classmates into a photography club," Imogen wrote in one such message. "They meet at recess with their parents' old phones to take pictures of hidden beauty on the playground. Her teacher is rather impressed with her leadership." Such communications, unimaginable 6 months earlier, reinforced my growing conviction that transformation was possible at any age, not just mine, but Imogen's as well, if approached with genuine effort and appropriate boundaries. The only discordant note in this otherwise harmonious period came, predictably, from Vivian Halloway. Her message, ostensibly directed to Warren but clearly meant to reach me, expressed concern about my extended absence with that photographer, and questioned what message this sends to impressionable young Lily about family commitment. Warren, to his credit, had forwarded the message with a simple eye-rolling emoji and the comment, "Thought you should see this," obviously ignoring it. "Lily misses you, but is also collecting things to show you when you get back. Her Portugal box is getting quite full." I chose not to engage with Vivian's transparent attempt at manipulation, instead focusing on the positive developments in my family relationships. The woman who had once held her breath waiting for Warren and Imogen's approval now breathed freely in the knowledge that connections worth preserving would withstand geographical distance and personal growth. Today marked a milestone in Dominic's project, the photography of an abandoned 17th century monastery being carefully restored as a contemporary arts center. The juxtaposition of ancient stonework and modern architectural interventions perfectly embodied his vision for the collection. I accompanied him to the site, not as an observer, but as a collaborator. Over the past weeks, he had increasingly incorporated my perspective into his professional work, valuing my academic understanding of architectural history and developing eye for compositional elements. "What do you see here?" he asked, as we stood in what had once been the monastery's chapter house, now transformed with a soaring glass ceiling that flooded the space with light while preserving the original stone walls. I took my time answering, absorbing the space's contradictions and harmonies. "Conversation across centuries," I said finally. "The past not erased, but recontextualized. There's humility in how the modern elements serve the original structure rather than dominating it." He nodded, already adjusting his equipment to capture what I'd articulated. Exactly what I was missing. I've been focusing too much on contrast rather than dialogue. As I watched him work, I was struck by the easy balance we'd established. The mutual respect for each other's expertise, the comfortable silences, the genuine interest in each other's perspectives. Was this what true partnership looked like? Not the careful accommodation I'd practiced in my marriage, necessary as it had been during those years of raising children and building careers, but something more equal and expansive? That evening, as sunset painted Lisbon in improbable shades of gold and rose, we sat on our terrace, sharing a bottle of port from the Douro Valley. The day's successful shoot had energized rather than exhausted Dominic, and he spoke animatedly about the project's evolution. "I've been thinking," he said, abruptly changing direction mid-sentence, "about what happens when this project concludes." My heart quickened slightly. We had carefully avoided discussions of our longer-term future, both of us perhaps superstitious about defining something that felt so unexpected and precious. "Oh? I've received an interesting proposition from the Portuguese Tourism Board, a book project documenting the country's less-traveled regions. It would mean another 6 months here, at least." "That sounds like an extraordinary opportunity," I said, keeping my tone neutral despite the implications. 6 more months would extend beyond my planned return to teaching. "It is," he agreed, "but it raises questions about arrangements." The careful phrasing made me smile. Arrangements. I'm too old for convenient ambiguity, Margot. His directness, always refreshing, cut through potential awkwardness. These months together have shown me what's possible at this stage of life. I don't want to return to disjointed weeks together and apart if there's an alternative. "What alternative are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already sensed the direction of his thoughts. "A life together, whether here in Chicago, New York, or some combination. Not necessarily traditional marriage, unless that matters to you, but a genuine partnership, shared space, shared projects, shared future, however much of that we have left." The proposition, for all its life-altering potential, didn't feel frightening or overwhelming. Instead, it felt like the natural continuation of the path I'd begun walking that Thanksgiving day when rejection had sparked rebellion. "I have tenure considerations," I said, thinking aloud, "and Lily. But sabbaticals exist for a reason, and airplanes make distance less absolute than it once was." Dominic reached for my hand, his expression serious, yet tender. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer, just for you to consider possibilities beyond conventional constraints." As darkness settled over Lisbon, lights twinkling across the hillsides like earthbound stars, I contemplated the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. From invisible grandmother to respected collaborator, from rejected family member to independent woman making choices based on joy rather than obligation. "I don't need time to consider," I said, the certainty in my voice surprising even me. "I want this. Us. However we define it." His smile, that private one I'd come to treasure, illuminated his face. "Then let's define it together, Professor Sinclair. One day at a time." On the table beside us, my phone chimed with a message from Warren. "Good news. Lily's photography won first prize in the school art show. She says to tell you she used all your techniques for finding beauty in forgotten places. We're all so proud of her. Hope Portugal is treating you well." Some invitations, it seemed, created ripples that extended far beyond their immediate circumstances, inviting not just presence at a single table, but the courage to claim one's place in the wider world. 1 year to the day after that fateful Thanksgiving, I stood in the Chicago Institute of Art Gallery, surveying the final preparations for my exhibition opening. Thresholds, Perspectives on Architectural Transitions featured not only my photographs from Lisbon, Chicago, and several other cities I'd visited over the past year, but also curated works from established architectural photographers, including, but not prominently featuring, Dominic. Your name should be largest on the promotional materials, he'd insisted months ago when we were discussing the exhibition design. This is your vision, your academic perspective informing the visual narrative. This professional generosity, his willingness to step back from the spotlight rather than overshadow my emerging work, was just one of countless reasons our partnership had flourished over the past year. The exhibition reflected my growing fascination with liminal spaces, doorways, windows, staircases, bridges, the physical manifestations of transition that seemed an apt metaphor for my own life's unexpected evolution. Each photograph captured a moment of passage, a threshold between what was and what might be. Professor Sinclair? The gallery assistant's voice pulled me from my contemplation. Your family has arrived. I turned to see Warren, Imogen, and Lily entering the space, followed by Freya Zaman, and most surprisingly, Vivian Halloway. The unlikely grouping, 3 generations of my complex family constellation alongside my closest friend and my former adversary, struck me as surreally appropriate for this milestone. Lily reached me first, flinging her arms around my waist with characteristic enthusiasm. At 6, now in first grade, she had grown taller and more articulate, but retained her unfiltered emotional expressiveness. "Grandma, your pictures are in a real museum!" Her voice echoed through the gallery, drawing smiles from the staff preparing for tonight's opening. "Indoor voice, Lily," Imogen reminded gently, then extended her hand to me. "Congratulations, Margot. The exhibition looks remarkable." The formality between us had gradually softened over the months, but we remained carefully respectful of each other's boundaries. Our relationship would never be warm, but it had evolved into something mutually respectful, a significant achievement considering our beginnings. "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuinely appreciative, "and for bringing Lily during school hours." "Educational field trip," Warren explained, embracing me warmly. Approved by her teacher when we explained her grandmother is a featured artist. Vivian approached last, her expression revealing the internal struggle between maintaining appearances and acknowledging her discomfort in this setting. "Quite an accomplishment," she offered stiffly. I wouldn't have missed it. The unspoken truth hung between us. She absolutely would have missed it had Imogen not insisted on her presence, part of their own complicated journey toward healthier family dynamics. Their relationship remained visibly strained, but Imogen's determination to break generational patterns of manipulation had created small openings for change. "I appreciate that, Vivian," I replied with diplomatic neutrality. As the gallery director approached to discuss final details before the evening opening, Warren guided my family toward the exhibition's first section. I watched them move through the space, Lily racing ahead excitedly, Imogen maintaining poised interest, Warren genuinely engaged, Vivian performing appropriate cultural appreciation, a tableau of imperfect family dynamics navigating new territory together. Freya remained behind, observing my observation with her therapist's perceptive gaze. "Quite a different Thanksgiving from last year," she noted quietly. "Indeed," I agreed, "though we're having the actual dinner tomorrow, at my place." This was perhaps the most profound transformation of all. My newly purchased condominium, with its spacious living area and stunning lake views, would host the family Thanksgiving dinner, not as a desperate bid for inclusion, but as the natural gathering of family in a home I had created entirely on my own terms. "Hosting now, are we?" Freya's smile conveyed her understanding of this significant role reversal. "And will your photographer be joining?" "He's flying in tonight, after the exhibition opening." The ease with which Dominic and I now navigated our bi-city existence had become a comfortable rhythm. 2 months in Chicago, 2 months in New York, with collaborative projects and individual pursuits woven throughout. The Portuguese Tourism Board project had evolved into a significant book deal, requiring occasional extended trips abroad, but we had established our primary residence in Chicago to accommodate my teaching schedule and proximity to Lily. My sabbatical next semester would allow us 3 uninterrupted months in Portugal to complete the book's final sections. "You've created quite a life for yourself, Margot," Freya observed. "When I think of where you were a year ago, uninvited and invisible," I finished, without bitterness. "And now?" I considered the question, watching as Lily enthusiastically explained one of my photographs to a bemused security guard. Authoring my own invitations, I suppose. The evening opening exceeded everyone's expectations. Critics and collectors mingled with university colleagues and art world figures, all engaged with the exhibition's central premise about architecture as both literal and metaphorical threshold. Several of my photographs received serious interest from collectors, and a publisher approached me about expanding the exhibition catalog into a full book exploring my theoretical framework. Throughout the event, I found myself continually surprised by how naturally I navigated these professional waters that would have seemed utterly foreign to me just 1 year earlier. The woman who had once carefully minimized her academic opinions to avoid appearing excessive now confidently discussed her artistic and theoretical perspectives with museum directors and gallery owners. When Dominic arrived directly from the airport, slipping quietly into the gallery's periphery rather than making a grand entrance that might distract from my moment, I felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected partnership that supported rather than diminished my emergence. He made his way gradually toward me, pausing to genuinely appreciate the exhibition as he moved through the space. When he finally reached my side, his eyes conveyed everything words couldn't in such a public setting. "Extraordinary work," he said simply. "You've captured something essential about transition that I've been trying to articulate visually for years." Coming from him, an artist at the height of his career, the compliment carried particular weight. "Thank you for not overshadowing me tonight," I replied quietly. "I know several people have approached you about your own projects." "Tonight belongs to Professor Sinclair," he said, with that private smile I treasured. "I'm merely an admiring colleague." The exhibition gradually emptied as evening deepened, leaving just a handful of lingering attendees. Warren approached as Dominic excused himself to speak with a curator from New York. "Mom," he said, his expression contemplative, "I've been thinking about last Thanksgiving all evening." "Ancient history," I assured him, not wanting him to carry unnecessary guilt. "Not to me." He glanced toward where Imogen was helping a sleepy Lily into her coat. "I let someone else dictate your value and place in our family. I won't make that mistake again." The simple declaration, offered without drama or excessive emotion, meant more than elaborate apologies might have. "We've all grown this year," I said, squeezing his hand, "in different ways." Later that night, in my condominium with its panoramic views of Lake Michigan, Dominic and I shared a quiet glass of wine, decompressing from the exhibition's success. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said, raising his glass slightly. Or perhaps more accurately, "Happy Unthanksgiving." I laughed, understanding his reference. From exclusion to exhibition, not a journey I could have anticipated. The best journeys never are. He reached for my hand across the table. "What are you most grateful for, Professor Sinclair, on this anniversary of your great rebellion?" I considered the question seriously, reflecting on the extraordinary year behind me and the open possibilities ahead. "The invitation I refused," I said finally, "and the subsequent invitations I accepted. From you, from myself, from life." "To refused invitations, then," he proposed, touching his glass to mine, "and the doors they unexpectedly open." As we sat together contemplating the city lights reflecting on the dark lake, I marveled at how thoroughly my life had transformed since that cold November day when Imogen had casually declared, "You're not invited." Sometimes, it seemed, the most profound journeys begin not with an invitation received, but with one rejected. The closed door that forces us to find our own thresholds to cross, our own tables at which to claim our rightful place. Tomorrow, my dining table would host the family Thanksgiving dinner. Warren, Imogen, Lily, even Vivian had been included in my invitation. But tonight belonged to reflection on the simple truth I had discovered over this transformative year. The most important invitation is the one you extend to yourself, to live authentically, to claim space unapologetically, and to recognize that at any age, the most significant thresholds are those we choose to cross on our own terms. Thank you for listening. Please write a comment rating my story from 0 to 10, subscribe, and send it to someone who also likes to hear stories like this. Best regards.